this point, Caltrans has done nothing to jeopardize our leases, and in all fairness to Caltrans, Dave Kelly was up front in March and said that, well, earlier than that, he'd said that there was going to be a slight reduction in grazing, and then in March it was going to be a substantial reduction in grazing. But to this point today, that Caltrans, all our leases are intact, and they haven't even said that they are going to be restricted, but I know that they're still working to try to come up to modify this grazing situation. But we have not seen a final map. We haven't seen a map, but when we sold the property, it was understanding that we were going to lose some areas, riparian areas along the creeks. Now, and that was the understanding, but the leases would remain in full force and effect, with the exception of the losses along the riparian areas. That, who knows? I mean, they keep extending it out. You know, there's supposed to be a hearing sometime or a public hearing sometime this fall, and now they're saying that all the documentation is not going to be done until the end of September. And once again, I mean, I think it's the Army Corps is telling Caltrans what they'll accept and won't accept, but then why won't they come to a public hearing? So I don't know when the hearing will be, but there should be at least a 60-day review when their final plan comes out. That I do not know. You'd have to ask. That's the question you should ask Dave Kelly.
Okay. So at this point, you're somewhat satisfied with them, or?
Well, we're still kind of in limbo because we have an under 180-day. They can terminate and give us 180 days to get off, but it's, 180 days can be short notice on certain times of the year, as when you're trying to plan a grazing regime. But there's no cattle. This is a seasonal wetland. It's not a permanent wetland. This whole valley is a seasonal wetland.
Right.
So so when it's dry enough, you've got to be able to use it. When it's wet enough, you've got to get out of here, just because it's just too wet. Well, we originally leased back from Caltrans, I think it was 928. And like I say, once again, what the reduction is going to be, I do not know. But I know the first map we saw in March, they were going to take away roughly between 600 and 700 acres of our ground. But now the rumor mill is that it's not going to be that much, but how much I do not know. I absolutely do not know.
So you feel as angry about it now as you did earlier?
Well, I was never really angry. I was just upset that why would Caltrans sign an agreement with a 4-year lease with the right to extend it for an additional 4 years, and then 3 or 4 months after the fact say that there's going to be a big reduction in the grazing acreage. Because my other argument is that, and nobody's really answered it, is that the original plan was that grazing was to be continued on this property, so there would be change of ownership, but no change in use. And Caltrans, it had to be change of ownership because that had to satisfy the state of California's needs for the ground. But if that's the case, then from my thinking, they should have to go back and redo the EIR, because the economic aspect of the environmental document has not been met. And also the environmental deal will change too if you do take the grazing. So they have to redo their EIR, both the environmental, for the environmental impact and the economic impact. And I don't know what checklist that's part of, but I don't know if it's NEPA or the CEQA, but I know that the original documents that they filed are inadequate.
So you feel the bypass is necessary?
Well, the thing of it is, I'm not going to stand in the way of progress, but I'll tell you, I don't like to be misled with let's say our legal aspect in this thing. If somebody wants to try to beat me in a legal game, well, let's just put it up on let the truth stand on its own, and let's just see where it goes. But we went in operating this whole contract all the way through in good faith, all the way through.
No matter what happens?
Well, we own this piece.
Okay, so you don't have to leave here.
Yeah, but I mean, this is my main bulk of my operation. I mean, this is everything funnels from here all the way to the old mill over there.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's the way, because this is the highest end of the valley, and so then it's all set up, it's all intermingled. I mean, we've been here for, well, since '81, and we kind of built this whole thing around this piece here. So because this is the highest, this is where it got good facilities.
Mm-hmm.
You can handle a lot of cattle here, and you can get in and out of here all year round with truck and trailers without getting stuck.
Right.
So.
Right. It's pretty wet down there in the winter. Yeah,
in fact, I was showing somebody out. Well, Mike Thompson was here. I guess it'd be a week ago tomorrow, and I was showing him out there right where we were standing. I said, "You may or may not believe me, but in that New Year's Eve storm here a few years ago, there was 13 feet of water right here."
Wow.
And he said, "Well, how do you know?" I said, "Because that's how high the debris was in the trees." So it's wet out there when it's wet, but it produces a tremendous amount of feed. That's the thing that's sad. You know, you think, what's the purpose of taking out a production of food and fiber? And then, see, when Caltrans bought this, they bought it under preservation, protection and preservation, not restoration and creation. That says it right in their own appraisal. And so, to me, it should qualify for preservation credits. And it's 90. By their own appraisal again, 90 to 95% of it's they qualify as high quality wetlands. So I mean, it's kind of a story of how do you make the best better, I guess. But that's what they bought it for. It was under a preservation and protection strategy.
Well, the saga continues. We'll hear from you or some sources as it develops, right?
A lot of their computer work was generated not by field studies. It was generated off a map. So there's no substitute by having your boots on the ground.